ministry, Father. I'm even asking now that you allow the Holy Spirit to lead, guide, and direct me as I continue to present and conclude on the effects and impact of trauma. I ask that everybody just be open and receptive to the information and allow your Holy Spirit to rest and reside in this place. I love, magnify, and lift you up. It's in your Son name we pray, Jesus Christ. Amen.
Amen.
Amen. All right. Well, welcome back. Welcome back. Today I'm going to be doing obviously part 2, discussing and talking about trauma. So before I get started, just so you know, I was trying to, as I would call it, like to make a lot of these words common denominators. So if you see a lot of technical terms, blame Minister Mike. What he told me was, if you don't give all the technical terms, I ain't coming. So he's here. So you're gonna see a lot of technical terms, but I'm going to break them down and try to simplify them and make this somewhat easy. Because it is a little bit easy, but as you know, anything with biology and science, they use a bunch of technical terms, but I want to break this down in very, very common denominator language you can understand, so that you really understand what trauma does. So we're really going to be focusing today on really when we experience trauma from a biological perspective, what happens. So even if you read this quote up, this statement up here, trauma is the experience rather than the exposure. If you remember last week we talked, and I mentioned the 3 E's of trauma, and they were event, experience, effects, right? And experience being the middle part of that, being the most important. And why is that? Because all of us in here can experience a situation simultaneously, correct? That doesn't mean that we're all going to be impacted and affected by it the same way. I mean, even today they showed a bridge in Baltimore that it actually collapsed. So I watched it on TV like most of us. We didn't have any major impact on me, right? But the people who were on that bridge, who were driving, and their cars plummeted into the water. From what I understand, only 2 people were retrieved out of the water. Only 2 people, they're still looking for 7. But from those 2 people who were in the water, best believe this was a traumatic experience for them. And it was basically based upon their experience. The event, the experience, and how they experienced it is what made it traumatic for them. So what we're going to do today is just spend a lot of time looking at biologically what happens to our bodies when we have a traumatic experience. This right here just was called, and a list that I created, these are what you would just call like the traditional types of trauma. You have natural disaster, mass shooting, motor vehicle accident, which is what happened on the Baltimore bridge today, rape and sexual assault, physical assault, torture, war, family violence, partner violence, and child abuse. Now understand this, none of these things in and of themselves cause trauma. Now, let me clarify and explain that. What happens is, these things create a stimulation. They stimulate a part of our body. I want to go a little further. In our nervous system that creates stress. And I say that because think of a mass shooting. Let's go back to the mass shooting, for example. If you were the kid who was in a classroom and your classmate was killed, right? You were going to be a lot more triggered by the sounds of gunfire than a classmate who may have been on the 3rd floor, who didn't necessarily hear anything, but he or she knows what happened, right? So even in mass shooting, the event itself does not have a traumatic impact. It's how the student experiences it. Now, for that student who witnesses it, what happens is something inside of him creates a trigger. So he sees it, he's now anxious, he or she's afraid for their life, and their body begins to do what we're going to talk more about that, begins to prepare itself for danger. Okay? And we're going to talk more about that, of why even some of these, again, they don't have the ability to cause trauma directly, but it's really how they're interpreted by the individual. And sometimes you can see, you can witness and be in a car accident, a week later, that car accident has no impact or effect on you. It's happened and it's over and you've gotten over it. Then you have these things here. Now, although the events that I just mentioned may not have what's called a direct impact on trauma, these things here, these are what's called low intensity trauma. These ones here, they are more likely, statistically and research says, these ones here typically have more of a traumatic impact in people's lives. Why? If you look at these things, the difference between these is chaotic environment, aggressive environments, punitive environments, inconsistent child rearing practices, instability in the family, in the home. So financial, I misspelled financial. I put financial. Financial, emotionally, and even housing. Now I'm gonna see if you guys can remember this. The list that I had previously, can you tell me what the difference is, or the differences between this list and the other list? There's a similarity in what's on this list here versus what's on the previous list. What's the similarity? What's the difference? I'm sorry. If we can see what that is. Ron.
Did you experience it alone?
Well, it could be, but not all of these. Because a chaotic environment can be experienced by multiple people. Okay, Amy.
This is more family oriented.
You're like, it's the hot one thing, yes.
This right here, it involves how you grew up, how you were raised. It's more in your inner family.
Okay, good. You're on the right track.
So like foundational experiences?
Well, another good example. So, the difference is, remember I talked about 3 categories of trauma, right? I said acute, chronic, and developmental. Chronic is when trauma occurs on a regular, consistent basis. So, if you think about a chaotic home environment for that kid, it's not, and again, it's what they call low intensity trauma. It's the fact that it happens on a consistent basis. An aggressive environment on a consistent basis. That person lives in an environment where his father slapped him around, he's getting bullied in school. It's low intensity, and again, not to minimize aggressive behavior, but at the same point, it's that constant, that chronicness of it. The acute, the mass shooting, it's a one and done, right? It happened one time, and then it's pretty much over with. The automobile accident, it happens one time, and it's over and done with. These things here, they happen on a consistent basis. So living in an environment where the finances are unstable. In other words, mom and dad doesn't know how bills are going to be paid. That creates stress and anxiety in the household. So now there's this tension in the household. And so to the point that Miles just made, which is very true, this creates in the person's development. Because when the child is born, their brain is underdeveloped. And by the time he or she gets to the age of 3, it's fully developed. But a huge part of how that person responds and deals with trauma from birth on happens in the first 3 years. How he or she is loved, it's 4 words. It's 4 words. It's how they're seen, how they're soothed, if they feel safe, and if they feel supported. Those 4 things. If those things don't happen in the home, the developmental process is delayed. A person has to feel, and they're in no particular order, they have to feel safe. There are some homes where a father may come home and he may not even speak to his children. Kids don't feel seen. And we're now just realizing that has that plays an impact on how that child develops. And what we're going to see eventually is that determines how he or she responds to trauma and stress if they don't feel seen at a very young age, if they don't feel safe. Feeling anxious and stressed in an environment delays a person's ability to develop. So we got seen, safe, supported, which means you having somebody who has your back, right? So seen, feeling safe, feeling supported, and feeling soothed. A child from a very young age, the touch of the human body helps to minimize stress. When a baby cries, he or she actually is stressed out. They're stressed out. Them crying means they're sending off signals. I'm hungry, I'm wet, I'm hot, I'm cold. Since they can't communicate, they're actually communicating and saying, I'm stressed out. And I'm going to show you what happens in the body even when the baby cries. All right. So here's the biological process of when a perceived threat comes into our bodies or we witness one. So you can thank Mike for all these big words. The first one is called the stress response system. The stress response system is what all of us have. It's your 5 senses. Everything that happens to you comes through these 5 senses: smell, sight, taste, hearing, touch, right? So when stress happens, it comes in through what is called your stress response system. Go back to that baby. Baby can't communicate, but the baby's not hungry. Rather the baby, and that is a biological response. All of us have. We have a biological response. Our 5 senses tells our bodies when it's stressed. You walk outside right now, you don't have on a coat, your body's going to be stressed out. Your senses is going to say it is cold. In other words, what happens is your body, it now becomes, so follow me on this. I'm gonna get too technical, but follow me on this. So right now, your body, if you're not hungry, you're not cold, your body's what's called regulated, okay? Anytime you are cold, you're hungry, it's now dysregulated. So regulated means I'm cool, I'm okay, I'm calm, or whatever. When that things are out of whack, it's called dysregulated. Keep following me now because I'm going somewhere. All right, so 5 senses, that's what everything comes through is our 5 senses. So stress happens, comes through our 5 senses. Then what happens is, so let's say the stress comes. Bills don't get paid. Now what happens is when a stressor comes into our lives, it goes into what's called the categories of association. So that means that it's now trying to figure out, has this happened before and what does this mean? Is this a good thing or a bad thing? So the stress comes. Now it's saying, okay, this is something I need to be worried about. And it puts it in a category. And here are some of those categories. All of us have what's called a range of tolerance. This is simply, we've heard the cliche when we was kids, or when adults used to tell you, you're getting on my last nerve. Your range of tolerance is basically how much stress you can handle. So 5 senses, so stress comes, it's now trying to find a place to identify itself, and where it goes is going to depend on what's called your range of tolerance. Some people are just able to handle stress better than others. If you notice right now, the generation right now, I would categorize them as having a very low range of tolerance. Why do I say that? Because the slightest thing makes them upset. The slightest thing dysregulates them. The slightest thing causes them stress and anxiety. That's because they have not built up what's called resilience in terms of their stress. So our ability to handle what's coming at us is based upon our range of tolerance of stress. I'll talk about this a little bit. I talked about the regulation and the dysregulation. So keep in mind, stress comes, threat comes, sends a signal comes from the five senses. It's now trying to get categorized, and trauma doesn't occur until you have exceeded your range of tolerance. Trauma doesn't, because when the event comes, if it's a stressful situation and you can handle it, problem solved. If the stress comes and you can't handle it, then it starts building, right? Then it starts building. And it keeps building until you reach your range of tolerance. Now, as I talked about the dysregulation of the body is always trying to be in a sense of regulation. So for example, going back to that child, once the child who's hungry, he or she eats, now they're regulated, the stress has been removed, they're okay. Same thing would happen when we hear about people who are stressed out. Until the stress is either ameliorated, destroyed, they will continue to stay in this stress mindset. Now, we already know what happens when the body is constantly running on stress. Adrenaline, blood flow, all of those things. Those things do have a negative impact on our bodies. Like I said, blame Minister Mike for all of this. Then you have, so stress comes, threat potential. It's trying to figure out what's happening. Your body's dysregulated. Then something is sent to what's called your central nervous system. Once your central nervous system is sent out, there's a message sent to your central nervous system, and it says, we got a Houston, we have a problem. Once that happens, here's what's called either the traumatic response or stress responses. We are going to do either one of four things: fight, flight, freeze, or fawn. Let me explain what these are. And this is automatic. Every time a stressful situation occurs, a traumatic experience occurs, these are the four responses. Now also keep in mind, your stress response system, it's on automatically. You can't turn it off. It doesn't ask for your consent, it doesn't ask for your approval, it doesn't ask for your vote of confidence. It just happens. How do we know? And we all have this, you've heard, you was in your house and you heard a loud noise. Your first response, you just jump, right? Because the loud noise startles you. Even so, your body, your five senses are always on alert, being prepared to determine and identify threat. Fight, flight, freeze, or fawn. So, when a threat comes, the first thing, in the simplest sense of the body, to the brain, we gotta go fight. We have a threat. So let's even use something as, let's use the military veteran. He's in a war, and so he realizes that in order to bring his body back, stress levels down, he has to fight and defeat the enemy. Not until that occurs is he going to feel safe. So the body now sends adrenaline, endorphins, morphine to the body to prepare itself for a fight. That's what it does. If the body realizes it is facing an opponent that it cannot defeat, the next thing is is that it will potentially flee, fall, run. Now, this one here, again, the objective is to remove and get away from the threat, to minimize danger, but in order to survive. If fleeing is not an option, then a person will freeze. The last two, the freeze and the farm, but the freeze, a lot of times, you will see this happen with individuals who, regrettably, who are victims of sexual assault. So you have, so let's use the example of, you have a 7-year-old girl who's being raped by her father. She's not big enough and strong enough to fight. But she's stressed out. Now, her range of tolerance is exceeded. She's obviously dysregulated. Central nervous system is saying danger, threat, not safe. But she can't fight against her father. She can't flee. So what happens is she'll freeze. Then something happens that is very unique. It is something, and there's a slide on it later, there's something that's called, for this person, there's something that's called dissociation, right? So we know what dissociation is. Dissociation is when you connect with something, when you bond with something. Dissociation is the total opposite. So dissociation is when you've heard people say things like, I don't know what happened, but I wasn't even inside of my body. I was watching it happen from above. And so in certain situations, the freeze causes a person to dissociate or to disconnect from the traumatic experience that's occurred. And that normally happens not so much with those acute stressors, but the chronic ones where it's happened for an extended period of time. People who are prisoners of war, who are rape victims, they will say things like, I knew it was happening, but I disconnected myself from it. So they just leave their bodies, which is a very unique thing. And it actually is, again, it's the brain trying to prevent the body from feeling so overwhelmed that it just collapses. Because what can happen in those situations, those stressful situations, especially sexual assaults and things like that, the person can just pass out and faint. That happens a lot, where the adrenaline is running so high that they just pass out and faint. So freeze is a lot of times what may happen. Yeah.
Would disassociation then, could disassociation be viewed as a protective mode?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes, because, like I said, the mind is always trying to interpret what's going on. And since it's so overwhelming, and so that the person doesn't, because for that little 7-year-old, she realizes that if I move, if I fight, he's gonna hit me, it's gonna be worse. So the protective factor is laced, and animals do this a lot. They'll try to play dead. Animals, like in the animal kingdom, the playing dead thing can save your life, because it'll make the perpetrator or whomever think that you're dead. They don't want to let somebody that's dead. So the freezing thing, it does temporarily save that person. The fawn is when a person tries to appease or please their abuser or the person that is posing the threat. And again, this is like an extension of the freeze point, but you'll see this a lot in households where there's domestic violence, where the female may know. Now again, she's in that situation, she's not wanting to leave because she doesn't want to start all over. She much rather be with him than be with somebody else. And so fawning is her trying to do the best that she can in order to keep him happy. Again, another survival technique. Traumatized, and then these people in these situations, I remember, for them, going back to the 7-year-old girl, her dad comes home. What do you think happens to her stress level? It goes up. Now, he hasn't said anything, hasn't done anything, but the moment she sees him, she's in a state of arousal. In other words, her stress levels are going up. Now, her blood is pumping, her adrenaline's up, and nothing's even happened, right? But her stress levels are up. And so the body begins saying, get prepared for the fight. Well, you're 7, you can't fight. You can't run out of the house. So it begins preparing for the inevitable or the pain that's going to occur. But think about that on a consistent basis. Every night, not every night, but just anytime that she sees or she's around her father, until she's able to get out. 18, 20 years old, just going through that on a daily basis. You being around this person, seeing them, and feeling that stress and anxiety, wondering, is tonight going to be the night? And like I said, they have learned how to disconnect and dissociate from the trauma by just disconnecting from the experience. This is so when there's a threat, there's 3 things that typically happen. We get a signal from our brain that says alarm. Then we try to resist the threat. So think of it like this. Think of the alarm is imagine if I'm on the side of the store and somebody's trying to come in, but I'm like trying to keep them out. The door's cracked, but they're coming. I'm trying to keep them out. And I'll use the example. She's not. Let's imagine it's Minister Mike's daughter, Melanie, right? You think I can keep her out the door? She's trying to come in the door. I can keep her out, right? Keep her out. A little bit of resistance, not a whole lot. But now let's say, and this is how stress works, right? Let's say it's just her, but then Mike joins in. Okay, I still may be able to keep him out, but the resistance is going to be harder. Now he comes in. And this is how stress works. So she's one stress point, he's another one. Now Miles is dead. Now Pastor Mike is dead. I'm trying to keep him out. And eventually, the stress and the resistance is coming my way. It's exhausting. I can fight it for a minute, right? I keep Melanie out. She's a small problem, right? Remember I talked about these, and again, stressors, they're based upon how we experience them. She's a small problem, but he is an extra weight. He's more resistance. I'm trying to fight it. Miles in, pastor in, eventually, I'm going to just give up and lose the fight. And this is what happens with people who are under constant stress. And we seem to minimize the fact that somebody says, okay, I'm a single mom. Okay, that's stressful. I'm having problems keeping employment. That's a stressor. I'm trying to keep adequate child care. I'm trying to find a job. And they're small things, but the buildup of those things causes her. Remember I talked about how when the traumatic experience happens, our ability to think and rationalize begins to diminish. So those stressors keep coming. If we can't fight them off, eventually I'm going to get exhausted trying to keep them out. I can't keep them out for so long. Now this is, I don't know if you guys can see this in the back, but I'm going to explain it. So this is a graph, a little sophisticated graph of our brain. So there's 4 parts to the brain. So we have what's called the brain stem. Anything that happens to us, it first comes to the brain stem. The message comes to the brain stem. So the brain stem is where the respiratory system is, your cardiovascular system is, your 5 senses, everything comes to the brain stem. So when we talk about threats and things like that, when the threat first comes, Daddy comes home, it's coming, the message is being sent to the brain stem, right? The next part of the brain is called the diastrophalon. Now, the writing it is spelled Diencephalon. Now, this is the part of our brain that's where our arousal is, sleep, appetite, and movement. That's very important. Keep that one movement and keep that in the back of your mind. Movement is very, very important. These are the parts of the brain. The next one is what's called the limbic system. The limbic system is the part of the brain where the reward system is held, our memories are held, bonding, and emotions. Now, going back to here, the young girl's dad comes home. The signal's being sent to her, danger. Now, all of a sudden, she's aroused. I'm talking, and arousal meaning, hyper-aroused means that she's alert, because now she's sensing danger. She may start fidgeting, moving. Now what's happening is her mind is beginning to play back memories of the previous sexual abuse. It's playing back memories of that. Her emotions are also running high. The last part of this is what's called, the part of our brain that's called the cortex. The cortex is our creativity, our thinking, our language, our values, our time, and our hope. That's called the cortex. That's the thinking part of the brain. Creativity, thinking, language, values, time, and hope. Limbic system is, again, that's where our emotions sit, that's where our memories are, and those kind of things. You see this play out a whole lot. You see this play out a whole lot when you'll hear about that veteran who he's a veteran and he doesn't like the 4th of July. For him, the 4th of July, when he hears firecrackers, it makes him think that, it makes him feel that he's back in the war. Now, he's a Vietnam veteran, so he's been out of the war almost 50-something years. But why is it that he can hear a sound and his body can go back 50 years? I'm gonna give you a quick example all of us can relate to. How many of us, Paris and I are probably cringing in their seats, how many of us like or used to like Christmas? You can raise your hand, you sit behind, you sit in front, you can't even see you.
They still like it.
I know, right? During the holidays, are there times when you may smell something, see something, hear something that reminds you of a Christmas that was 10, 15, 20, 30 years ago? Now, and the sight of that thing, the smell of that thing, you get this feeling inside of you, right? It's like you're almost back there. Reason being is because our bodies, now catch this, our bodies does not operate on chronos. It has no sense of time. Let me explain. When that Vietnam veteran hears that sound, he may mentally know that that war that he was in was 20, 30, 40, 50 years ago. Mentally, he knows that. But when he hears that sound, because his body responds automatically, his body doesn't know the difference. And because the brain stem and the limbic system, it is always there to assess threat. It doesn't have time to send the signal to the brain, oh, it's safe. His body just responds. He hears the sound, he's hitting the deck. No time to think about it, no time to contemplate, no time to debate the thing. Oh, that's, no. His body tells him threat, and it responds. It's the same way that you can if you think about it, you can feel certain hurts and pains from your past. If you've ever had a heartbreak, you can feel that. If you think about it, you can feel that, knowing that it happened years ago. Your body can be right back there. Why? Because your body, this part of your body, it does not operate on chronos. Your brain is where the chronos is. Your brain is what is able to make the distinction. That's not a real threat. That happened 10 years ago. Your body doesn't know that. And so, when a person is in a traumatic state, when they are responding to what they fear is a threat or a danger, they are not able to rationally think. Remember I told you guys last week, when a person is feeling threatened or in danger, this part of the brain cuts off access to the cortex. It cuts it off. Because it says, listen, we ain't got time for your rational creativity. We trying to be safe. We trying to make it home alive. And I can, I mean, I can even, well, I have a cousin of mine. I have a cousin of mine who just got out of the penitentiary, did 25 years for a homicide. And I've had a couple of conversations with him. There are times when we're having a conversation, he still moves and has a demeanor of somebody who has been, you can tell him a lot, because he moves a certain way. I mean, his neck is always on a swivel, he's looking for danger, and he knows that he's no longer in there, but his body, his brain knows that he's safe, but his body is telling him, listen, prepare for a fight, prepare for danger, right? So this is vitally important when a trauma occurs, understanding that if it doesn't reach the cortex or the part of your brain that's able to think and rationalize, a person is going to act and behave irrationally without thought. That's how they behave. Can you guys see this? Yes, no? I'm getting some yeses and some no's. Okay. Okay, so this part here, I'm going to explain and go through this. And this is everything that we kind of talked about, but there's a couple points I want you to pay attention to. So state here, dominant brain areas. We talk about different parts of the brain area. We have what's called adaptive option arousal or adaptive option dissociation or dissociative. Then cognition and functional IQ. This is important. So when a person is calm, right, and they're functioning in their cortex, and they're calm, they're functioning in their cortex. No problems. They can be reflective. They can daydream. They have abstract thinking. IQ is relatively high. All right? They're functioning on a high level of IQ. When a signal comes to the brain that there may be impending danger, we go over to what's called alert. Now we talked about that that's in the limbic system where your feelings and emotions are. In those situations, the dominant part of the brain is now still the cortex, but it's leaning towards the limbic. And the alert is basically like, okay, there may be something going on, something may be wrong. And so what happens is we begin to flock and prepare for a potential fight. We could avoid it, or we could flock towards it. Then, even in this state, we're still functioning on a relatively high level of IQ, and we still are able to do what's called concrete thinking. So it's like the black and white thinking. Here's where it gets interesting. Once the alarm bell sounds that there's a threat, now we're looking at potentially freezing, the complying, and the emotional state sets in. Now, if you notice, the more the fear heightens, the lower the IQ becomes. Now, I'm gonna stick by here for 1 minute. How many of us have ever been in an argument with a boyfriend, or girlfriend, or husband? all these hands should be up, all this, no videotaping this. So look, it starts off with a mild disagreement, right? You're calm. Y'all disagree about something. You can still reflect. You can still do what's called abstract thinking. You're still relatively calm. But now she done said something slick. Now she done said something to piss you off. Now all of a sudden, your spidey senses is tingling. Now all of a sudden, you getting ready. Now at this point, you're getting prepared for a fight, but you still are relatively in control of your emotions. Now you jump over here. This is where it gets interesting. At this point, when the alarm kicks in, now you are almost in full flight mode because now you are more responding out of your emotions. You're in the limbic system part of your brain. Now keep in mind, you're about 2 steps away from thinking. How many of us have, in the midst of an emotional debate, argument, or whatever the case may be, you said, and you realized you was not, as a matter of fact, you said something you had no business saying, it was disrespectful, you don't even remember some of the stuff that you said, but because you were in your emotions and the part of your body was telling you, danger, fight, and you begin, your emotions got the best of it, so now you're slowly but surely beginning to collapse intellectually. Now over here, fear is setting in. Now I'm not talking about fear in terms of what may happen to you, but what's happening is now you don't move into this place of you straight up just define. And we'll see this a whole lot in when me and Pastor Mike worked at Human Center. What we've seen a whole lot of from young bucks, we either seen them being very defiant, or they would have what's called paralysis or catatonia, which means just I don't even care. So there's a part of trauma where a person, where their dissociation is them being almost paralyzed, unable to move, or they have a nonchalant, I don't care type of attitude. And they are very and extremely reactive. Quite a few times, I see your hands, quite a few times, they're not even, again, see how far removed they are from making an intelligent decision? Because they're in their past their emotions, they're in their feelings, we call it here, and now they're trying to react based upon the emotions.
I just wanted to say, like, being in all the different environments, prison, placement, streets. I mean, see our community, we all react, and it's like we're in a constant state of alarm and fear. I'm saying, based off these different categorizations of where our mind states are and our IQs associated with it. I'm saying, you can see that real, like you say, that freeze, that state of like, nonchalant, laissez faire, like that's our community in a nutshell.
And thank you. I'm glad you caught that, because think about it. We more than any other people, I mean, and we can prove this, that African Americans have been exposed to more trauma than any other racial ethnic group on the planet, anywhere. They did, now this is the, they did a, because people have these negative views and connotations of us. They did a study, they talked about, they said that in terms of crimes, that African Americans commit 10% of all crimes directed towards white people, 10%. Okay, it's enough, but listen to this. 10% of all the crimes that are committed against white people by African Americans. The coverage of it is 42%. So the media coverage of the crimes that are committed against whites are 42%. So think about this. If I'm a white person, more than half of all the images that I see about you, and me, and all of us, is that I'm a threat. You're a threat. I should be afraid of you. More than half of those. Now, what frightens me about that is that these white police officers, they got TVs too. And so before they joined the force, and even sometimes while they're on the force, all they had seen, all they're accustomed to is seeing images of me and you raping, assaulting, and I don't know about you guys, but I gotta be honest. And it's not that I wish it, I'm just being transparent. Every time that I see a crime on TV, the first thing that comes out, I hope he wasn't black. I hope when I hear about it, especially if, again, being honest, especially if it was something against somebody white. A white female, my mind is, Lord, I hope he wasn't black. And when it is, I am, because I know at that point, it is feeding into a narrative of how they perceive us. So the final one is this point here, where the stress is so high, and again, the stress is coming through the brainstem. Your ability to think and to rationalize is almost next to none. So, went from 120 IQ down to 80 to 60. Why? Because, like I said, in times of threat, in times of fear, in times of stress, your ability to think and to rationalize, it is cut off. You don't have access to the cortex of your brain, which is the thinking, creative side of your brain, which says, pump the brakes, take your time, don't do that. Under fear and stress, your brain does not have time. It doesn't allow that. And that's why I said for us, that constant stress and threat of stress, it has such a weight so heavy on us. One thing I do not do as a therapist, I'll have people who will bring, they bring their kids, and they'll say, he or she, way back there. Thank you, bro. He or she's cutting up, he or she's cutting up. Fix my child 6, 7, 8 years old, right? The parent only gets mad at me when I ask them this. I will always ask them, one of the reasons your child is probably behaving that way is because of the environment. Tell me about the environment in the home. When me and Pastor Mike taught at the Monte Christian Academy, there were students who, again, they came in our class, they sat disciplined, followed directives. If they had to pee, they would hold it for fear of they would not be afraid to leave. Sat still. Leave our classroom, and now we're running up there, breaking up, they're in a fight. It's not the kid. It was the environment. And so I don't work with a lot of kids under the age of 14, because once I say to the parent, if they're that way, I'm looking at you saying they need to come here. I'm saying you need to come here as well. All of y'all can come. They can come, but you need to sit in this office as well, because there's obviously something that's happening in the home that is not being controlled. There's something that's happening in the home that this kid is feeling stressed out, and it is unfair for us to say to a child, you need to control the environment that you're in. We say control your behavior, but the behavior is always indicative of the environment that he or she is in, always. And so think about that. Our little kids go to school who may be living in home environments where mom is struggling, dad is beating on mom is a drug addict, and he had to, because his mom is out getting high, he got to stay up and get his little brothers and sisters ready for school. He's the father of the household. Now, he come to class, he's nodding off in class. The teacher's sitting there pissed off because she thinks he's being disrespectful. Well, he done been up since 3 o'clock in the morning His mom didn't even come home, but he holding it down. He ain't telling, he's afraid to tell you what's happening inside the home because he know if he does, y'all gonna remove him and his siblings out of the household. So he gonna bite that bullet. But now the school is labeling him ADHD, he's a problem, we need to do something with this kid. And they're labeling it a behavior problem, though it's an environmental problem. And so a lot of schools are not open and receptive to understanding what I said to you guys last week, not what's wrong with you, but what happened to you. Not asking that important question. Go ahead.
Is that how like they get us looking at the behavior, not the environment? Like even where we from, so like they're like, man, what's wrong with these kids? What's wrong with these people in this environment? They always reacting and arresting the behavior instead of fixing the environment.
So that's in a nutshell, because, and listen, because we are all human, we are always going to respond and act based upon the environment that we are in. It is a proof. If you go in an environment, that's why it's so important, the people that you surround and you associate yourself with. You know what I'm saying? I mean, I'm a firm believer in that behavior is very contagious. A lot of things are contagious. They've done research, I know, and Pastor Michael remembers this, they've done research in terms of how kids learn, especially in schools. If the teacher came in there with an expectation that you guys can learn, that you guys are intelligent, just making the subtle suggestion that you're intelligent, they took kids who, again, were struggling academically and found out that they were scholars. Same kids. There wasn't a pill given. Only thing was given was words of affirmation. All of a sudden, this kid done went from not paying attention, doodling, falling asleep, failing every test, to being a straight A student. All environment. So, and so we, a lot of times, we will blend in and adapt to the environment that we're in. And so what that actually is called, actually it's one of those psychological terms, they call it it's called adaptive. It's just called being adaptive.
Is that a form of Stockholm syndrome?
So Stockholm syndrome, okay, so Stockholm syndrome is something different. Stockholm syndrome comes from, to some point here, when somebody is in an abusive, dangerous situation. And this happened with you ever hear of Patty Hearst? Okay, so Patty Hearst was kidnapped by I think it was from. Well, go ahead. Thank you. I couldn't remember the name, but what she said. So she got kidnapped by one. And so they were going around, they were robbing banks, whatever the case may be. And so by the time she was in captivity, so by the time they end up capturing her, she had begun to embrace and align herself with the movement and with the ideology. So Stockholm syndrome is a person aligning and affiliating with a mindset, and it's coming from somebody who was abusing them. And that's where the Stockholm comes from. So she was actually one of the people that she fell victim to that. And she actually, she was a believer in the revolution at that point, in their revolution. But it definitely can happen, because when a person is in a captive, is a captive somewhere, survival, how to get out of this, takes precedent. That's what takes over. And so, is that a survival technique? Yeah, it definitely is. Is it a form of what they call mitigation? Yes, it is. Mitigation is basically you trying to minimize a threat by going directly at it. And if you can eliminate it, you blend it in with it. Great question, great question. Right on time. I have one more slide. So here are some of the signs of unhealed and unresolved trauma. So codependence, low self-esteem, hypervigilance, people-pleasing tendencies. Now that one is a surprise for some people, because what does happen is people who've been traumatized, they are not interested in rocking the boat, as you say. They want to just kind of just keep the peace. Increased anger or aggression. Another one is avoiding crowds. Flashbacks is a common one, especially for those people who've had traumatic experiences that involve gunshots and violence and things like that, or sexual assaults. We already talked about dissociation. That is another sign of unhealed or unresolved trauma. Substance abuse. This one is interesting because remember how I said when stress occurs, the body is dysregulated, in other words, just kind of off kilter. So imagine a person who was always stressed out. Imagine that little 7-year-old girl. Now she's 15, 16 years old, right? And she's still feeling that stress and anxiety. But now she gets introduced to alcohol. You know what alcohol does? It temporarily relieves the stress and anxiety. And so when she gets a taste of, wait a minute, wow, for an hour, 2, 3 hours, I did not feel anxious. I actually did not feel dysregulated. I felt regular. I was calm. And so now she sees that substance as a way to relieve and reduce her stress. And I always say and I have clients who struggle with addiction and things like that there. My saying is this: he or she they don't have a problem with alcohol. They have a problem with reality. And they use alcohol to cope with reality. For her, reality's too grim. It's too scary. It's too much reality. So to cope with it, she uses alcohol. So the problem is not so much with alcohol, it's with reality. So getting her to accept and embrace the reality, then she won't need the alcohol. I mean, that's a simplistic way to describe it, but that's in a nutshell. So now we have, and so in the field, we focus on going after the alcohol. Okay, but what made that person pick up and start abusing? What's the symptoms that caused her to use that? Let's look at that. Yes, ma'am.
Alcohol and drugs tend to cut off the frontal lobe, right? That's the part that you think.
That's the thinking part, exactly. Because it's going to relax you. It's going to appeal to the brain center, the limbic system. It's going to make you feel good. It's getting your senses. It's making you feel good, and it's reducing and removing stress. The ability to think and rationalize cut off. Yes, sir.
So what would happen to the person who has the trauma, and then the alcohol is making them feel better for that temporary amount of time? But then they drink so much alcohol that the brain is now addicted to it to a certain extent. So when you said it's not the alcohol is the problem, what happens when literally it does become the problem? If you didn't deal with your reality, they can still be addicted to alcohol, but now the brain is craving it.
Right. And that does happen. So now, great question. Another big word, thanks to Minister Mike. So there's a thing that's called neuroplasticity. So neuroplasticity is the ability of the brain to change its DNA, in order to change its thinking and its way of doing things. Not easy, but there's evidence that shows that neuroplasticity is real. How real is neuroplasticity? Listen, you can click on YouTube and learn how to do anything. Right? You can watch videos on how to learn how to play a piano all you want, right? But in order to learn how to play, you have to be operating on that part of your brain that accommodates that. So in other words, you can look at the video, but until you physically get down and start doing it, right, you're not operating on a part of your brain that's going to change your ability to learn how to play. So, to your question, Pastor Mike, yes, that does happen, but that means that there needs to be changes in the wiring of the brain, neuroplasticity, in order for that to occur. Then there's another thing that's common amongst addicts. It's something it's called symptom substitution. Symptom substitution is replacing one habit for another habit. So a lot of times a person who ends up being an addict, they may have what's called addictive personality, right? But so now, an addictive personality is not always a bad thing. He's addicted to reading. Not a bad thing, it's good, right? Getting addicted to certain things may not be always bad, but we need to find something that is positive to replace that with. It's called symptom substitution. Replacing one bad habit with a good habit. Make sense?
Doctor,
Yes, ma'am.
you said that children are products of their environment.
Yes, they are.
How difficult is it to come to parents on the need to change that negative environment?
Yeah, that's a color of a whole different horse. That's a horse of a whole different color. But it is not, I mean, just like anything else, you have to, for me, I have to be able to convince them. I have to get them to buy into why that's important. And I don't do it in such a punitive, accusatory kind of way. I mean, I'm oversimplifying it by saying I don't do that, but I'm doing it more of an encouraging kind of way, and just saying things like, your presence here is going to be paramount and critical to your child's success. In fact, you being here encouraging them, so I'm using stuff like that. I'm using the Jedi mind tricks. I love Star Wars, so I'm real fluent in the Jedi mind tricks. I'm using all of that stuff in order to convince him or her their presence, which is actually true, is going to be very important and vital to the success of that child. Because if not, I can do all, and Pastor Mike can tell you, and I keep going back to the Imani example, we would sit there and grit for, I mean, listen, joking these kids up, snatching them up, and they cool for an hour. They go right down the hall, and they forgot everything. It's as if, and it didn't have nothing to do with them, it had to do with the environment that they walked into that facilitated and allowed that chaotic behavior. That was the only difference. And it wasn't even about gender, because we had a couple of females, Malia and Sharice, who were able to handle kids who was, these females was 5'2", 5'3". They was handling kids who was 6'1", 6'2". Nothing to do with size, but they created an environment where I'm not tolerating a habit environment. Any other questions? Kind of run over my time a little bit, but.
You good?
Oh, okay, go ahead, Miles.
You said something last week. You were saying, you were speaking about people who had one of them types of traumas, not getting PTSD or something like that. I forget exactly what you said.
So when the reality is, so 70% of all people in America are going to experience trauma. And there's only a small percentage, like 30% that will end up, 29% actually, that will end up with PTSD. So a lot of times it is not as serious to cause PTSD. So the even a person's support system and how they even handle stress when they were kids determines how they handle trauma when they get older. So depending on the severity of the event, the environment that it happened in, the age of the person, a lot of different dynamics, a lot of variables go into if it develops into PTSD, but that is not always a given. As a matter of fact, when you look at it, most people will not, if they have a traumatic experience, will not end up with PTSD. Only 29% of people who have a traumatic experience end up with it. That's a pretty low amount. In fact, last point, they did a study. Remember the World Trade Towers or whatever, right? So, out of all the people who were in the building, only 5% of the people who were in that building for the plane crash on 9/11, only 5% ended up developing PTSD. And the common denominator was this. The people who did develop PTSD, all of them had a couple of things in common. They either lived in an environment with an abusive home, it was a veteran, or it was an abusive home, a veteran, or child abuse. So everybody who developed PTSD from 9/11, who was in those towers, it was when they went back into an environment, a home environment, that was not with those four things that I talked about. It was not safe, it was not secure, it was not soothing, it was not supportive. And everybody who developed it had that in common, their home environment was bad. And I know that's deep. I read that research, I was blown away.
After the 9/11, they went into a chaotic environment. They just went into an unhealthy
Right,
environment.
they didn't go to a safe haven, because a lot of times the person has a traumatic experience, one of the things that helps them is being able to go into an environment or to a space where they feel safe, secure, and supported. In other words, they're in this environment where they can live through and walk through that trauma and not have to be re-traumatized. So if I walk into a home where I'm being abused, I done just got I'm all white because I got airplane dust on me. Now I'm getting in the home, I get slapped in the face. All right.
Good job.
Thank you all. All right, let's take up an offering. And so anybody that's coming out, and the time is 7 o'clock, not 6:30.
Okay, so
It's 7 o'clock.
Okay.
You showing up to come with tomorrow? Yeah, to support this thing I'm doing for Elder Doug.
Don't say no more.
you tell us something.
All right. Look, I was pausing. Hey, cuz, get it, cuz. Make another statement when she go home. All right, let us pray. Dear wise and merciful God, we just thank you for this evening. We ask that you allow us to make it home safely. And we ask that you just, hopefully, anybody who have any additional questions, they can come and see me, but hopefully the information was relevant, that it was pertinent, they was able to learn something. Father God, we love, magnify, lift you up. We accept this offering in your son's name, and we ask for safe traveling mercies as we ascend back to our homes.